My name is Avery Dalton. I'm 27 years old. And the night my boyfriend looked me in the eye and told me that if I couldn't handle his friends' jokes, I could pay and leave, was the night 3 years of confusion suddenly turned into clarity so sharp it almost felt peaceful. I live in Kansas City. I've been working electrical for most of the last decade, and I'm good at it. I make decent money keeping buildings alive and people comfortable, and when I'm not on a job site, I spend more of my free time than I should. Bringing old Harleys back from the dead. Apparently, I have a deeply committed relationship with busted wiring, rusted metal, and expensive mistakes. That used to be a joke my boyfriend Caleb loved. Back when he still acted like the things that made me me were charming instead of embarrassing. I met Caleb 3 years earlier at Howell's over in Midtown. I was there with my friend Hunter celebrating his promotion. Caleb was there with a group for some birthday dinner. All polished shoes and expensive cologne and that easy confidence people have when the world has mostly been kind to them. We ended up at the bar talking for an hour. Not about work, not about money, just life, music, bad tattoos, travel plans neither of us had taken yet. He asked me about the bike grease under my nails and actually listened when I explained the difference between restoring something and just making it run. He laughed at my stories from job sites. And when I made fun of myself, he laughed with me instead of at me. He worked in marketing. Ambitious, sharp, socially effortless. He had that polished city boy energy that should have annoyed me, but instead it pulled me in. He made me feel seen in the beginning. That's the dangerous part, I think. The people who do the most damage rarely start by looking dangerous. They start by paying attention. For the first few months, I thought I'd gotten lucky. Then the little fractures started. The first one I remember clearly happened when I invited him to my friend's barbecue competition. He wrinkled his nose and asked, "Are there going to be normal people there too, or just your rough around the edges crowd?" He said it smiling like he expected me to laugh. I did. Not because it was funny, because that was easier than stopping the moment and asking myself why the man I was falling for talked about people I loved like that. There were other moments. He would look at me after I came home from working on a bike, hair tied up, grease on my jaw, t-shirt ruined, and say, "You know, you're beautiful when you make an effort. You hide it under all this mechanic energy." Mechanic energy. Like femininity and competence couldn't possibly live in the same body. When he invited me to corporate events, he always had notes. Wear your hair down. Maybe skip the boots. Try not to talk too much about work unless somebody asks. He said it gently. He always said it gently. That was his gift. He could make control sound like concern. We moved in together after about a year and a half because his lease was ending and my place in Midtown had more room. That, in hindsight, was the kind of decision people call practical when what they really mean is emotionally expensive. Here's where I made my real mistake, though. It wasn't moving in with him. It was trying too hard to be accepted by his people. Caleb's friend group was made up of 3 women who had turned passive aggression into an art form. Vanessa was the ringleader, the kind of woman who could insult you with a smile so sweet it made you feel crazy for noticing. Brielle could turn any conversation into a competition she had already decided she'd won, and Sienna specialized in comments that sounded harmless until you replayed them alone later and realized they had tiny blades hidden inside. At first, it was subtle enough that I kept doubting myself. Last summer, I smoked brisket for Caleb's birthday, got up before dawn, tended the fire, did the whole thing right. When his friends showed up, Vanessa looked over the setup and said, "Oh, wow, this is so authentic. It feels like one of those rustic cooking shows people watch when they want to cosplay being down to earth." Brielle laughed and added, "It's honestly adorable that you did all this yourself. My ex usually just books somewhere upscale, but this is definitely more personal." Then Sienna smiled over her wine glass and said, "Well, at least Avery's good with her hands. I'm sure that adds value somewhere, right, Caleb?" They all laughed. I felt the insult land, but like always, it had been wrapped just carefully enough to make reacting seem dramatic. Later that night, when I brought it up, Caleb rolled his eyes and kissed my cheek like I was a child who needed calming down. "They were joking," he said. "You take everything so seriously." That sentence started showing up everywhere after that. When he came with me to meet my family in Liberty, my mom had spent all afternoon cooking. My dad is a retired union electrician. My mom works for the school district. They're good people, practical people. People who show love in second helpings and repaired screen doors and remembering how you take your coffee. In the middle of dinner, I glanced over and saw Caleb texting under the table. I wasn't trying to snoop, but his screen was bright and I saw enough. A group chat with the girls. Very authentic working class experience. Pretty sure everything in this house has been fried. I can feel the cholesterol hugging me. It felt like being slapped in my own childhood kitchen. Then my mom, smiling, offered to pack him some leftovers because I'd told her he liked her casserole. Caleb touched his stomach lightly and said, "That's so kind, but I'm really trying to avoid carbs right now." My mother smiled anyway. That was the thing about my mother. She could take hurt and fold it into politeness so neatly, most people never saw it. I saw it. On the drive home, I finally said, "That was rude." He looked out the window. What was rude? The texts, the comment about my mom's food, the whole thing. He let out this little disbelieving laugh. "Avery, I was being polite." "You mocked my family." "No," he said, voice turning cool. "You're overanalyzing. Again." That again hit harder than the rest. Because once somebody convinces you that your instincts are an overreaction, you start betraying yourself for them. Quietly, repeatedly. Until one day you don't recognize the version of you that keeps apologizing for noticing disrespect. The dynamic got worse around Hunter. Hunter does HVAC, makes great money, and has never once in his life confused bluntness with cowardice. He saw straight through Caleb's friends from the start. At a housewarming party, when Vanessa made some smug little comment about manual labor being so important for people who don't really fit corporate spaces, Hunter looked right at her and said, "Yeah, funny how people like you need folks like Avery every day and still act superior while your air conditioning runs on someone else's skill." The room went dead quiet. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the first honest thing anyone had said all night. In the car, Caleb tore into me. "You embarrass me," he snapped. Hunter was aggressive and rude. I stared at him. "Your friends spend every gathering taking shots at me, my job, my family, and that's harmless. But the second somebody answers back, suddenly it's disrespectful." "They're making conversation," he said. Hunter made it ugly. "No," I said softly, looking out the window. "He just said it plain." That became the pattern. His friends insulted. I noticed. He minimized. If I pushed back, I was sensitive. If somebody defended me, they were classless. So I started skipping dinners, skipping parties, pretending I had emergency calls or projects in the garage or work that couldn't wait. Caleb noticed. He just didn't care enough to stop it. Hunter warned me more than once. "They're training you," he told me one night while we worked on my shovel head in the garage. "Making you think your self-respect is the real problem." I remember tightening a bolt and saying, "It's not that simple." He leaned against the workbench and looked at me in that maddening, truthful way of his. "It is," he said. "You just love him." And that was the problem. I did. So when Caleb got promoted to senior marketing coordinator the next month, I wanted to celebrate him properly. I really did. I suggested dinner downtown. My treat. Somewhere nice. Somewhere grown up. Somewhere his friends couldn't possibly turn into a blood sport for one night. That last thought should have embarrassed me more than it did. The reservation was at 7. I booked a quiet corner table at Capitol Grill. Told myself maybe this would reset something. Maybe he'd feel proud enough, secure enough, happy enough to be kind. Maybe his friends, seeing that I was paying for the whole evening, would act like adults instead of polished vultures circling a carcass. For about 5 minutes after we sat down, I believed that fantasy. Caleb looked beautiful in a dark charcoal shirt I'd never seen before. Sleeves rolled just enough to show the watch he bought when he got his bonus. He smiled at me across the table, eyes warm, voice soft, and for one stupid aching moment, I remembered exactly why I had stayed so long. Then Vanessa arrived in a designer blazer and the kind of perfume that entered a room before she did. Brielle followed, already taking pictures of the bread service. Sienna came last, all sleek angles and predatory calm, like she had dressed for an acquisition. Drinks were ordered, cocktails with names longer than conversations. Appetizers expensive enough to make normal people blink. I let it go. This was his night, I told myself. He talked about the promotion, the raise, the retreat in Denver, the new responsibilities. He was glowing, and despite everything, I was genuinely happy for him. I almost relaxed. Then the appetizers hit the table, and Vanessa smiled at me, the way a woman smiles right before she slides in the knife. "So, Avery," she said, cutting into her shrimp cocktail with surgical precision. "Still doing electrical?" I smiled back. "Still doing the job that keeps half the city functioning, yeah." She gave a little laugh. "Must be nice having something so straightforward. I mean, you basically just follow instructions, right?" I felt my spine straighten. Across from me, Caleb said nothing. And in that silence, I knew the night was about to become exactly what it had always been building toward. I paid for my plate and walked away. I felt it before it fully happened. That slow tightening in my chest, that quiet awareness that the next few minutes were going to matter more than anything that had come before. Vanessa's words were still hanging in the air when Brielle leaned forward, swirling her drink like she was about to offer something insightful instead of cruel. I mean, she added, it's not like you need an education for that kind of work, right? Meanwhile, Caleb's dealing with executives, strategy, brand positioning. Sienna didn't even wait for me to respond. And the motorcycle thing? She said, tilting her head. What is that exactly? A hobby where you burn money on scrap metal? I set my fork down carefully. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just deliberately. I restore vintage Harleys, I said, keeping my voice level. It's technical work, precision, research. It takes time. Sienna smiled. That razor-thin smile I had come to recognize too well. Sure, she said softly. But how much do you actually waste on those projects? Caleb, you could do so much better. Remember Daniel from that conference? Real estate development, actual ambition. There it was. Not even subtle anymore. I turned my head, looked directly at Caleb, waiting for him to laugh it off and say, all right, enough. Waiting for him to do the bare minimum. Waiting for him to choose me in the smallest, simplest way. He didn't. He just gave that awkward little laugh. The one he used when he didn't want to pick a side. The one that said, let's not make this a thing. Something inside me went very still. The rest of dinner blurred into a slow, methodical dissection. Grease monkey. How do you even understand Caleb's work? Do you just nod along when he talks about real business? Honestly, I don't know what you two even talk about. Each comment landed cleaner than the last. Because this time I wasn't trying to excuse it. I wasn't trying to reinterpret it. I was just hearing it, fully, for what it was. Finally, I looked at Caleb again. All right, I said quietly, that's enough. He exhaled like I had just become a problem. Avery, he said, tired, irritated, like I was interrupting something important. They're just having fun. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive. The word hit differently this time. Not like an accusation. Like confirmation. Sienna laughed. Oh my God, she said. Are you actually upset right now? Vanessa leaned back, clearly enjoying this now. And then Caleb looked at me, straight into my eyes, and said it. Look, he said, voice flat. If you can't handle my friends being honest, you can just pay and leave. The table went quiet. Not shocked, not concerned. Just waiting to see what I would do. 3 years of history balanced on a single moment. 3 years of explaining things away. 3 years of adjusting myself smaller so he could stay comfortable. And suddenly, I understood something with a clarity that made everything else feel stupid. This wasn't new. This wasn't a bad night. This was the truth, finally said out loud. I nodded once, slowly. Okay, I said. I reached for my purse, pulled out my wallet, did the math in my head. My steak, my drink, tax, tip. I placed the cash on the table, more than enough to cover my part. This covers my meal, I said calmly. Caleb's eyes widened. Avery, sit down, he snapped. Don't be dramatic. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel the urge to fix anything. Standing up for myself is dramatic, I said quietly. But this? I gestured lightly to the table. This is normal? No one answered. Of course they didn't. I picked up my keys. Enjoy the night, I said. And I stood up. The restaurant felt louder now. Or maybe I was just hearing it clearly for the first time. A couple at the next table glanced over. The server paused mid-step. The hostess watched me as I walked past, her expression soft, almost sympathetic. Behind me I heard it. That high-pitched, brittle laugh. Vanessa. She's actually leaving, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Brielle added, relax. She'll be back in 5 minutes. I didn't turn around. Didn't slow down. Didn't stop. Because something strange was happening with every step I took. It was getting easier. By the time I pushed through the doors and stepped into the night air, I realized something that should have scared me. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. I stood there for a second in the parking lot, breathing. Really breathing. Like I hadn't in months. Then I got into my truck and drove. 10 minutes in, my phone started buzzing. Caleb. Call. Call again. Text. Very funny. Come back and pay the bill. Another. Avery, stop. This isn't cute. Another. Are you serious right now? Get back here. I kept driving. Didn't answer. Didn't slow down. By the time I hit Midtown, the text had shifted. Less control. More panic. Because reality had started to land. They had ordered, like the bill didn't matter. Multiple appetizers, expensive entrees, cocktails, wine, dessert. The total had to be pushing 500. And I had left maybe 60. My phone rang again. 17 missed calls by the time I parked. 4 voicemails. The last one didn't sound annoyed anymore. It sounded strained. Like someone trying to hold together a situation that was already falling apart. I grabbed a duffel bag when I got inside. Packed fast. Clothes. Toiletries. Charger. Essentials. My phone kept buzzing on the counter like something alive and angry. I ignored it. Walked back out. Drove to Hunter's place. It was almost midnight when I knocked. He opened the door, took one look at the bag in my hand, and just nodded. Finally, he said. No questions. No hesitation. Just stepped aside. Come in. I walked in, dropped the bag by the couch. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. Hunter handed me a bottle of water. You good? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I said after a second. I think I am. He smirked. Took you long enough. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I sat down, leaned back, and let the silence settle. My phone buzzed again. And again. And again. I flipped it face down. Didn't touch it. Didn't read anything else. That night I slept. Deep, heavy, uninterrupted. The kind of sleep you only get when something toxic finally lets go of you. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of my phone losing its mind. Hunter was already up, leaning against the counter, scrolling through something. He looked at me, then at my phone. Your boy's having a meltdown, he said. I picked it up. Hundreds of messages. From Caleb. From Vanessa. From Brielle. From Sienna. I opened the first one. I can't believe you humiliated me like that. Next, you left me with a $500 bill. Next, you need to send me money. Now. Then the others joined in. Vanessa wrote a full paragraph about how I had manipulated them into thinking I would pay. Brielle called me a pathetic loser. Sienna sent a Venmo request. $150. Emotional distress plus Uber. I stared at it. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. Because at that point, it was so absurd it crossed into something else entirely. Hunter leaned over my shoulder. Emotional distress, he read? That's bold. I shook my head. I'm blocking all of them. Wait, he said, that familiar, dangerous grin forming. Let me have a little fun first. He reached for my phone, and I didn't stop him. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was done being the easy target, and they had no idea what that meant yet. When humiliation turned into theft, Hunter didn't hold back. He leaned against the kitchen counter like he had all the time in the world, scrolling through the messages they'd sent me, that slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. All right, he said. Let's return the energy. Before I could say anything, he started typing. To Vanessa, Avery asked me to pass along that she's sorry your personality is so unpleasant, it needs designer clothes to distract from it. Have a great day. To Brielle, calling someone a loser while begging them for money is wild. Also, small world. Daniel's been in my cousin's DMs all week. To Sienna, thanks for the Venmo request. We needed the laugh. Charging someone for emotional distress after you spent hours insulting them is next-level delusion. You should look into that. Then he blocked all three. Clean, efficient. Done. He handed my phone back like he'd just finished a chore. There, he said. Now they can spiral in private. I exhaled slowly. Part of me expected to feel guilty. I didn't. If anything, I felt lighter. But they weren't done. Not even close. Around noon, there was a sharp, aggressive knock on the door. Not a polite knock. Not a hey, can we talk knock. The kind that said they had already decided they were right. Hunter raised an eyebrow, walked over, and checked the peephole. Then he let out a low whistle. Your fan club's here. My stomach didn't drop. That was the strange part. It stayed completely steady. Because something fundamental had shifted inside me the night before. I walked over quietly and stood a few steps behind him. Through the peephole, I could see them. Caleb, Vanessa, Brielle, Sienna, all lined up like they were about to stage an intervention, or a confrontation, or a performance. Avery! Caleb's voice cut through the door, loud enough for the entire hallway. I know you're in there. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Right. Hunter opened the door just enough to block the frame with his body. Ladies, he said pleasantly. And Caleb. To what do I owe the honor? Caleb tried to look past him. Where is she? Hunter didn't move. Not here, he said smoothly, but I'm happy to pass along a message. Vanessa crossed her arms. Tell her she needs to Venmo Caleb for last night. This whole stunt is embarrassing. Hunter tilted his head slightly. Just to be clear, he said, you're asking her to pay you for insulting her for 2 hours? Brielle scoffed. That's not what happened. No? Hunter's voice stayed light. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're upset your ATM walked out. Caleb's jaw tightened. This isn't about that, he snapped. She made a scene and left me with the bill. Hunter nodded slowly. After you told her to leave. That's not, Caleb started, then stopped himself. That pause said everything. Sienna stepped forward, trying to push past Hunter. We're not leaving until she pays, she said. That's when Hunter's expression changed. The humor drained out of it completely. All right, he said quietly. Here's how this is going to work. The air shifted. You're trespassing, he continued. You're harassing my guest. And if you don't turn around and walk away in the next 10 seconds, I'm calling the police." Vanessa let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're seriously threatening us?" Hunter didn't blink. "I'm informing you," he said. Silence. Then Caleb tried again, softer this time. "Avery," he called past Hunter, voice tightening. "This is childish. You can't just run away from your responsibilities." Something about that word again. Responsibilities. Like my role in his life had always been to absorb whatever he and his friends decided to throw at me. Hunter leaned casually against the doorframe. "Message received," he said. "Anything else?" They stood there for another minute. 2, 3. Long enough for the tension to turn awkward. Then Vanessa huffed, turned on her heel, and started down the hall. The others followed. Caleb hesitated for half a second longer, like he was waiting for me to appear. To fix it. To apologize. To come back. I didn't. He left. Hunter closed the door, locked it, then looked at me. "Well," he said, "that was fun." I let out a slow breath. "They're not going to stop," I said. "No," he agreed, "they're not." And he was right, because by that evening it had escalated. Social media. Caleb had posted first. A long, dramatic paragraph about how I had abandoned him at his own celebration after he had worked so hard to include me. Vanessa shared it with a rant about toxic behavior. Brielle posted pictures from the dinner with captions about men who can't handle strong, successful partners. Sienna tagged me directly. Tagged my family. Tagged my work. That part made my chest tighten. Not from fear. From anger. My phone rang. I answered this time. "Mom?" "Honey," she said carefully. "Some people are saying things about you online. Your sister's already in the comments arguing with them." Of course she was. I closed my eyes for a second. "It's okay," I said. "I'll handle it." "You sure?" "Yeah." I hung up and opened the posts. It was worse than I expected, but also predictable. They had rewritten the story completely. I was the unstable girlfriend, the ungrateful one, the one who couldn't handle being around successful people. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I locked my phone, set it down, and stood up. Hunter looked over. "That the part where you go nuclear?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, because something else had just clicked into place. If they wanted to play public games, fine. But first, I needed to secure what actually mattered. The next morning, I drove back to the apartment. I still had my key, still paid half the rent. Legally, I had every right to be there. The second I opened the door, something felt off. The smell hit first. Stale wine, takeout containers, something sour underneath it all. The place looked like a storm had passed through. Cushions out of place, drawers slightly open, like someone had been moving fast, or angry, or both. I stepped inside slowly. "Caleb," I called. No answer. Good. I moved toward the living room. That's when I noticed it. The empty space. My PlayStation. Gone. I frowned. Walked to the bedroom. Opened the closet. There it was, tucked behind a stack of his clothes. Like he thought I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't say anything. A slow, cold feeling started to build in my chest. I turned, walked toward the hallway closet, opened it, and froze. My toolbox, or what was left of it, half empty. I dropped to a crouch, pulling drawers open one by one. My voltage tester, gone. My multimeter, gone. Wire strippers, specialty tools, gone. Not misplaced, gone. I stood up slowly, heart starting to pound now. "Caleb," I said again, louder this time. Still nothing. I moved through the apartment faster, checking everything. Bathroom, bedroom, closet, kitchen drawers. Some things were there, but not all. Not nearly all. And then I saw it. My socket set, under the bathroom sink, wrapped in one of his expensive towels. Hidden, like stolen goods. My stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't messy. This was intentional. I pulled out my phone, opened Facebook Marketplace, and there it was. Listing after listing, under his name. My tools, price to sell fast, way below value. My hands went cold. I scrolled. Then I saw it. The listing that made my vision narrow. 1979 Harley Shovelhead, project bike, $3,000 OBO. My bike. The one I had spent 8 months rebuilding. The one that wasn't even close to finished. Worth at least 4 times that. "Are you kidding me?" I whispered. There were already messages. Interested buyers. One offering full price. Planning to pick it up that weekend. I didn't hesitate. I called the non-emergency police line. "My boyfriend is selling my property without permission," I said, voice steady. "I have documentation proving it's mine." The dispatcher paused. "Are you currently at the residence?" "Yes. I can send an officer out to take a report." "Do it." I hung up. Then I called Hunter. "I need your trailer," I said. "Now." "What happened?" "He's trying to sell my bike." Silence. Then, "I'm on my way." I stood there in the middle of the apartment, phone still in my hand, surrounded by the remains of a life I had shared with someone who clearly thought it belonged to him. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't reacting. I was done reacting. This was where it changed. Consequences started collecting. The officer arrived 10 minutes before Hunter did. Mid-30s, calm, the kind of presence that immediately made everything feel more official, more real. He stepped inside, took one look around, and then at me. "You the one who called?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, handing him my phone. "These are my tools, my bike." He listed all of it without my permission. He scrolled through the listings, nodding slowly. "You have proof of ownership?" "I've got receipts going back years," I said. "Photos, too. Insurance records." "Good," he said. "That helps a lot." "That helps a lot." "Not this is a misunderstanding." "Not work it out between yourselves." "No." "That helps a lot," because it meant what I already knew was true. This wasn't relationship drama anymore. This was theft. Hunter pulled up outside a few minutes later, trailer already hitched. He walked in, took one look at the half-empty toolbox, and just shook his head. "Wow," he muttered. "He really went for it." The officer gave him a brief nod. "We're documenting everything," he said. "If he glanced at me, wants to press charges, this is enough to move forward." "I do," I said. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The officer nodded again, like he had expected that. "All right," he said. "Let's get your property secured first." We worked fast. Loaded the Harley onto the trailer like it was something alive we needed to protect. Careful. Precise. Then the tools. Everything we could find. Everything that hadn't already been listed or sold. By the time we finished, my hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the realization of how close I had come to losing everything that actually mattered to me. The officer finished taking notes. "File this report," he said, handing me the case number. "Keep every screenshot, every message. If he tries to sell anything else, call it in immediately." "I will." He paused at the door. "Just so you know," he added, "selling someone else's property like this, it doesn't usually end well for the person doing it." I met his eyes. "I'm counting on that." After he left, I stood there for a moment in the now half-empty apartment. It didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't for a while. I just hadn't admitted it yet. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Avery, this is Mr. Wayne, my landlord." "Hey," I said. "I was actually going to call you." "Well," he said carefully, "I just spoke with Caleb. He told me you moved out and refused to pay rent. He's asking to have you removed from the lease." I let out a short, humorless breath. "I've been gone 4 days," I said, "and I'm standing in the apartment right now with a police report for theft." There was a pause. "A police report?" "Yeah, he's been selling my property." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well," Mr. Wayne said slowly, "that changes things." "You want the truth?" I added. "I'll take over the lease myself. I can cover it. I've never missed a payment." "That's true," he said immediately. "You've been one of my best tenants." "Then let me stay," I said, "without him." He exhaled. "I'm open to that," he said. "But there's another issue. We've had 2 noise complaints this week." I closed my eyes briefly. "Monday night?" "Yes." "Figures." "That wasn't me," I said. "That was him and his friends." "I understand," he said. "But one more incident and I have grounds for eviction. I need this situation stabilized." "It will be," I said, "one way or another." We hung up. I stood there for a second longer, then turned, walked out, didn't look back. Back at Hunter's place, everything felt clearer. Not calmer, clearer. There's a difference. I spread everything out on the table. Screenshots, listings, messages, evidence. Hunter leaned over it all, whistling low. "This is bad," he said, "for him." "Good," I replied, because at this point, I wasn't interested in understanding him anymore. I was interested in ending this properly. I picked up my phone, opened our messages, scrolled past the accusations, the insults, the demands. Then I typed, "You have 24 hours to return everything you took." After that, I pressed charges. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then, "Those are gifts. We live together. What's yours is mine." I stared at the message, then smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was exactly the wrong answer. I called the number the officer had given me. "Detective Morrison," a voice answered. "This is Avery Dalton," I said. "He's claiming the stolen property was a gift." There was a brief pause. "Do you have proof otherwise?" "I have receipts from before we even met." "Then that's not a gift," he said flatly. "Text him. Ask for documentation. When he can't provide it, we proceed." "Understood." I hung up. Typed again. "Please provide receipts or documentation proving these items were gifts. The detective is requesting it for the report." No response. Minutes passed. Then hours. Nothing. I set my phone down. "Round 1, Hunter said, tapping the table lightly. "Round 1, I agreed. Meanwhile, online, the narrative had started to crack. At first, Caleb's post had gained sympathy. Friends, coworkers, people who only saw the polished version of him. But then the comments started shifting. Questions, inconsistencies. People asking why I would leave if everything was so perfect. Then Hunter stepped in. He found Brielle's Instagram story, posted just hours after demanding money from me. Another expensive restaurant. Another glamorous dinner. Caption complaining about cheap people. He screenshot it, posted it directly under Caleb's rant. Funny how someone who can't afford a $500 dinner is out spending $150 the next night. Almost like this isn't about money. That post spread. Fast. Then something even better happened. A server from the restaurant commented, "I worked that night. They were rude to staff and left no tip." She was the only polite one at the table. I stared at that comment for a long moment, then leaned back. "That's new," I said. "What is?" "People telling the truth without me having to drag it out of them." Hunter grinned. "Told you. Let people talk long enough, they expose themselves." But the real shift, the real turning point, came from someone I hadn't expected at all. A message request, from a name I recognized. Marcus, Sienna's boyfriend. I hesitated, then opened it. "Hey, I saw everything. What they've been sending you. This is messed up." I didn't reply right away. "Just read." Another message came through. "You want to know something interesting?" I stared at the screen, then typed. "Go on." His reply came almost instantly. "Sienna lost her job 3 weeks ago. She's been lying about it, living off credit cards and my money. That Venmo request? She actually needed it." I blinked. "Read it again." Slowly. Then, "I'm done with her. Watching her demand money from you after everything they said? That was it for me." Another message. Screenshots. Text between them. Sienna calling me a charity case. Saying Caleb was slumming it. Saying I didn't know my place. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just confirmation. Marcus sent one last message. "You didn't deserve any of that. Just so you know." I stared at it, then typed back. "I know, now." Hunter leaned over my shoulder. "Dominoes," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah," I said, "dominoes. Because once the first one falls, the rest don't stop." The price of looking down on somebody? The call from Detective Morrison came 2 days later. I was in Hunter's garage, sitting on an overturned bucket, cleaning a part from the Harley that still smelled like oil and thyme when my phone buzzed. I answered immediately. "Dalton." "She returned most of the tools," he said. "Dropped them off at the station yesterday. Claims it was all a misunderstanding." I let out a slow breath. "Of course she did." "They weren't returned out of goodwill," I said. "They were listed for sale." "We know," he replied. "We've got the screenshots. Question is, do you still want to move forward?" I didn't even look up. Yes. No hesitation. No second chances. There was a pause on the line. "All right," he said. "We're adding fraud as well. She signed your name on the motorcycle listing." I closed my eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "Good," I said. Because at this point, I wasn't interested in getting my things back. I was interested in making sure he understood exactly what it cost to treat someone like they were disposable. The arraignment was scheduled for the following Friday. Caleb showed up in a suit that looked more expensive than anything he'd worn when we were together. But it didn't fit right. Not physically. Something about the way he carried himself now, like confidence had been replaced with calculation. His lawyer did most of the talking. Tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. A domestic dispute. A blurred line between shared property. The prosecutor didn't buy it. Not with the receipts I brought. 6 years of them. Not with the photos. The insurance documentation. The timestamps on the listings. The forged signature. When the judge asked Caleb if he had any proof the items were gifts, his lawyer leaned in, whispered something. Caleb shook his head. "No," he said quietly. That moment. That was the real collapse. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a man realizing there was nowhere left to stand. The plea came quickly after that. Misdemeanor theft. 1 year probation. Full restitution. Fines. A record that wouldn't disappear just because he wanted it to. I watched him while the judge spoke. He didn't look at me once. And I realized something strange. I didn't need him to. The fallout didn't stop there. It never does. Consequences don't hit all at once. They collect. Quietly. Relentlessly. Caleb's promotion? Gone. Not officially at first. But when HR found out about the charge and the public mess tied to his name, it became a liability they didn't want near clients. He got moved. Sideways. Then down. His corner office turned into a shared workspace. Then into silence. Mr. Wayne served eviction papers the same week. Noise complaints. Police involvement. Lease violations. 30 days to leave. Vanessa's situation unraveled next. The fake review she left on my business page, calling me unreliable, unprofessional, backfired harder than she expected. My lawyer sent a cease and desist, then a defamation notice. Her company settled. $8,000. Not enough to ruin her, but enough to mark her. Enough to follow her. Brielle's collapse was slower, quieter. Her boyfriend, Daniel, the real ambition guy, pulled her credit report during a lease renewal. $47,000 in debt. 2 years of pretending. 2 years of curated perfection funded by borrowed money. He left within a week. The lifestyle went with him. The post slowed, then stopped. Sienna fell the hardest. Marcus didn't just leave. He documented everything. The spending, the manipulation, the demands. Filed for a restraining order. Emotional and financial abuse. That label sticks. She couldn't pass background checks after that. Lost the next job opportunity before she even started. Last I heard, she was working a call center job, living in a place she would have mocked 6 months earlier. Funny how perspective works when reality removes the filters. And Caleb? He tried to reach out once. A message. Short. Carefully worded. I never thought it would go this far. I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back. You just never thought I'd stop accepting it. I blocked him after that. The friend group didn't survive. Of course it didn't. People like that don't stay loyal when there's nothing left to gain. They turned on each other. Blamed each other. Picked apart every decision that led them there. The group chat went quiet. Then disappeared. 3 years of polished friendship dissolved the moment there was no one left to pay the bill. A month later, I moved into a new place. Smaller. Quieter. Mine. No tension in the walls. No second-guessing every word before I said it. Just space. I finished the shovelhead. Took it out for its first real ride on a Sunday morning. The engine sounded exactly the way I'd imagined it would. Steady. Powerful. Earned. Hunter still comes by every week. We work on bikes. Drink cheap beer. Talk about nothing and everything. No one's laughing at me. No one's measuring me. No one's asking me to shrink so they can feel bigger. Marcus stops by sometimes too. We don't talk about the past much. We don't have to. Some things explain themselves once they're over. I used to think the worst part of all of this would be the humiliation. The dinner. The comments. The moment he told me to pay and leave. But it wasn't. The worst part was how long I stayed after I started noticing. How many times I let someone convince me that respect was something I had to earn by tolerating disrespect. I don't do that anymore. Now, if someone shows me who they are, I believe them the first time. And if they tell me to leave, I don't argue. I don't explain. I don't wait for them to take it back. I just stand up, pay for what's mine, and walk away. Because the truth is, that was never the moment I lost something. That was the moment I got everything back.